The morning I brought a bulldozer to tear down my neighbor's gate, half the county showed up to watch. Some people came because they thought I'd finally lost my temper after months of fighting. Others came because folks in northern Idaho don't get many live shows outside of high school football and bear sightings. But the truth is, by the time that steel gate hit the dirt, I wasn't angry anymore. That part had burned out weeks earlier. What I felt instead was something colder, quieter, the kind of calm you get when you know somebody pushed too far and the law finally landed on your side. My name's Wade Mercer, and for most of my life I stayed about as far away from drama as a man reasonably can. I'm 58 years old, widowed, own about 70 acres of timberland outside a little town called Alder Creek, tucked up near the mountains where cell service dies every few miles, and everybody still waves when they pass your truck. My land isn't fancy, doesn't have a lake house or ski lodge or any of that magazine cover nonsense. It's working land. Pine, cedar, logging trails, a couple old deer blinds my brother built before he passed, that sort of place. I made my living the same way my father did, and his father before him. Timber contracts in the fall, hunting leases during elk season, occasional land management work for the state when wildfire season gets ugly. It's honest money. Not glamorous, but steady. Enough to keep diesel in the truck and food in the freezer. Only problem was, my property sat deep behind 3 other parcels, and there was exactly one road leading in or out. A narrow gravel access road that cut through the valley before connecting to the highway about 6 miles south. That road had been there since the Eisenhower administration. Everybody around there knew it. Ranchers used it, loggers used it, utility crews used it. Hell, Old Man Grady used to ride his horse down that thing every Sunday morning wearing suspenders and carrying fishing poles. Legally speaking, I had a permanent unrestricted easement written directly into my deed. My attorney once described it as about as airtight as easement language gets, which mattered because logging trucks aren't exactly subtle. You can't haul 40-foot pine logs through mountain country if somebody decides they suddenly want privacy. For 14 years, nobody cared. Then the Caldwells showed up. Trevor and Elise Caldwell came from California, though they made a point of saying Southern California, like that somehow mattered. They bought the front parcel cash only through some real estate company out of Boise, and within a month they were talking about building their forever retreat in the wilderness. Trevor had one of those expensive outdoorsman beards that looked professionally trimmed every morning, and Elise dressed like she was permanently headed to a yoga retreat, even when she was standing ankle-deep in mud. Now, to be fair, I tried to like them. I really did. The first time we met, I was hauling equipment back from a logging section up north. Trevor flagged me down near the bridge crossing, smiling like we'd known each other for years. "Hey there," he said, sticking out his hand. "Trevor Caldwell. We just bought the Hartman place." I shook his hand. "Wade Mercer." He looked past me at the trailer and nodded. "You do logging?" "Among other things." "Well, man, this area is incredible. We've been dreaming about getting away from city life for years." I remember laughing a little at that because everybody says that before the first real winter hits and the power goes out for 3 days. Trevor asked about the road, who maintained it, whether snowplows came through in winter. Normal questions. I explained the easement situation, told him my property sat at the very end, and I ran trucks through there pretty regularly during timber season. "No problem at all," he said. "We're easygoing people." That sentence aged like spoiled milk. About 3 weeks later, I came down that same road hauling a load of cedar posts and nearly put my truck into a ditch because standing across the access road was a gate. Not some little ranch gate either. I'm talking a massive black steel monstrosity bolted between 2 fresh stone columns with keypad entry, security cameras, motion lights. Looked less like a mountain road and more like the entrance to a private compound. For a second, I honestly thought I'd taken the wrong turn somehow. I climbed out of the truck just staring at the thing, hearing my engine idle behind me while those cameras slowly pivoted in my direction like something out of a prison yard. Then my phone rang. Trevor. And the second I heard how cheerful his voice sounded, I knew this was about to become a whole lot bigger than a gate. "Pretty nice, right?" Trevor said before I could even speak. I remember just standing there beside my truck, one hand on my hip, looking at this ridiculous gate blocking a road that had been open longer than either of us had been alive. "You put a gate across my easement." There was a little pause, not nervous exactly. More like he'd rehearsed this conversation in his head already. "Well, technically it's on our property, he said. We just figured with all the break-ins happening nowadays, it made sense to secure the entrance. I looked around at the valley. Alder Creek had maybe 400 people, half of them over 60. The biggest crime we'd had in the previous year was somebody stealing propane tanks from the gas station. What break-ins? You can't be too careful these days, Wade. There it was. That tone. Polite on the surface, but underneath it, this quiet assumption that his opinion automatically outweighed everybody else's history. I need through, I told him. Absolutely, he said quickly. We're not unreasonable. I'll text you the code. No, I said. Another pause. No. My easement doesn't say I need permission. It says unrestricted access. His voice cooled maybe 2 degrees. Not much, but enough to hear it. Well, unrestricted doesn't mean unsecured. I actually laughed at that because it was such lawyer brain nonsense. You from California folks always think changing the wording changes reality. That didn't land well. Look, Wade, we spent a lot of money on this property. Elise doesn't feel comfortable with random people driving through at all hours. Random people? I said. Trevor, I've been using this road since before you knew this town existed. Well, now there's a gate. And honestly, the code's a fair compromise. That word sat with me all evening. Compromise. Funny thing about compromise, it only works when both people actually own something worth negotiating. Trevor acted like he was generously offering partial access to a road I already had full legal rights to. Still, I didn't explode. That's not really my nature. I drove home, parked the truck, made coffee, and sat on my porch for about an hour watching the tree line move in the wind. My wife, Karen, used to say I processed anger like an old diesel engine, slow to start, impossible to stop once it got going. She'd been gone 6 years by then. Cancer. Fast and ugly. Some nights, I still caught myself turning to tell her things before remembering the chair beside me would stay empty. And sitting there that evening, staring at those woods we built a life around, I realized something that bothered me more than the gate itself. Trevor didn't think I'd fight him. That was the real issue. To him, I was just another older local guy with muddy boots and an old pickup, somebody he could smooth talk into accepting reasonable conditions. He figured if he sounded educated enough and expensive enough, eventually I'd fold. What he didn't understand was country people can smell disrespect faster than smoke. Next morning I drove into town and visited Leonard Pike. Now Leonard was about 72 years old, built like an oak stump, and had practiced rural property law longer than Trevor had probably been alive. His office sat above an old feed store downtown, and walking in there felt like stepping back into 1987. Wood paneling, dusty elk mounts, black coffee that could remove engine grease. Leonard listened without interrupting while I explained everything. Then he opened my deed records, adjusted his glasses low on his nose, and read quietly for maybe 5 minutes. Finally, he leaned back and grunted. Well, he said, this one's easy. That good? For you? Absolutely. He tapped the paperwork with one thick finger. Permanent unrestricted right-of-way access for ingress, egress, utility maintenance, commercial hauling, and timber transport. That sounds pretty clear. It is clear. He looked at me over his glasses. He can't obstruct it. So what happens now? Leonard smiled a little. Now we give your new neighbor an opportunity to stop being stupid. That afternoon, he drafted a formal notice demanding removal of the gate within 10 days. Professional, clean, no drama. Honestly, if Trevor had swallowed his pride right there, the entire thing probably would have ended peacefully. Instead, 3 days later, Leonard got a response from some expensive law firm in Seattle. I still remember his reaction because he called me laughing. Wade, he said, your neighbor hired attorneys who bill more per hour than my first truck cost. What did they say? They claim the gate isn't technically obstructing access since they provided a keypad code. I nearly spit coffee across my kitchen. Then Leonard read the next part. They would also like to discuss a mutually beneficial road use agreement moving forward. Agreement, I muttered. I leaned back in my chair, just shaking my head. So they want me to negotiate rights I already own. Looks that way. That's when the whole thing shifted from annoying to personal. Because after that letter, Trevor stopped pretending to be friendly altogether. Construction crews started rolling in almost daily for their new house project. Massive concrete trucks, excavation equipment, lumber deliveries, septic installers, and every single vehicle tore that gravel road to pieces. Deep ruts, washboarding, drainage damage. I'd maintained that road myself for over a decade, paying out of pocket whenever spring runoff chewed it up. One afternoon, I caught Trevor standing near the worksite while a cement truck sank halfway into the shoulder. "You planning to help repair any of this?" I asked. He didn't even look embarrassed. "My attorney advised me not to discuss shared maintenance obligations until the easement issue is resolved." I stared at him for a second. "The easement issue already is resolved. You just don't like the answer." He crossed his arms. "Funny thing about the law, Wade. There's usually more than one interpretation." I looked past him toward his half-finished luxury cabin sitting above the ridge, all glass windows and steel roofing, completely out of place against the old timber country around it. "No," I said quietly. "Usually there's just one truth and a bunch of expensive people trying to bend it." That one hit him. His face tightened immediately. "You know, people around here could benefit from modernization." I laughed. "Buddy, people around here survived just fine before you arrived." After that, things got colder. Neighbors started hearing stories from the Caldwells about how I was aggressive and territorial. Elise apparently told people she felt intimidated whenever my trucks came through, which was interesting considering I'd spoken maybe 20 words to the woman total. Meanwhile, Leonard filed for an injunction, and that's when Trevor made the mistake that eventually destroyed his gate. He underestimated the judge. Judge Harold Bennett wasn't some young city-appointed activist trying to reinvent property law. The man grew up in logging country. His father hauled timber. His grandfather ran cattle. He understood exactly what an unrestricted easement meant because communities like ours literally depended on them. The hearing itself lasted maybe 40 minutes. Trevor showed up in a tailored jacket with two attorneys beside him looking like they were headed into corporate arbitration. I wore work boots because I'd come straight from clearing deadfall off a trail. One of Trevor's lawyers stood up and started talking about reasonable security measures and modern liability concerns. Real polished stuff. Judge Bennett let him finish. Then he looked down at the deed paperwork for maybe 10 seconds. "That easement language is about as broad as I've ever seen," he said. Trevor's attorney tried again. "Your Honor, our clients are simply requesting controlled access." The judge cut him off mid-sentence. "Controlled access is still control." Dead silence. Then came the line that basically ended the case. "If this road was intended to require permission, the deed would say so. It does not." I swear Leonard actually smiled beside me for the first time all day. Judge Bennett ordered the gate removed within 14 days. If not, I would be legally authorized to remove the obstruction myself and recover associated costs. Clear. Direct. No wiggle room. Outside the courthouse, Leonard lit a cigarette and said, "Well, your neighbor's either about to learn humility or double down like an idiot." Turns out he already knew the answer, because 14 days came and went, and that gate never moved an inch. By day 12, people around town had already started placing unofficial bets on what Trevor would do. Some thought he'd cave at the last second and quietly remove the gate in the middle of the night to save face. Others figured he'd drag things back into court somehow, keep stalling until winter hit and everybody got too tired to fight. Me, I had a different feeling. See, there's a certain kind of person who mistakes consequences for negotiation. Trevor had spent his whole life throwing money and lawyers at problems until they bent. Deep down, I honestly think he believed the judge's order was just another pressure tactic, another step in some endless process where wealthy people eventually wear everybody else down. But rural folks tend to see things simpler than that. A fence is either open or closed. A promise is either kept or broken. And a court order is either followed or it isn't. Morning of day 15, I woke up before sunrise and poured myself coffee while the valley was still dark. Couldn't sleep much the night before. Not because I was nervous exactly, more because the whole thing felt surreal. You spend enough years living quietly in the mountains, your biggest concerns become weather patterns and fuel prices, not whether you're legally authorized to bulldoze somebody's custom-built security gate. I remember standing on the porch hearing coyotes way off near the ridge line, thinking Karen would have laughed herself sick over this entire mess. Then my phone buzzed. It was Leonard. "You still planning to do it?" "Yep." "You hire somebody?" "Pete's bringing the dozer." There was a pause. "I'll meet you there." Pete Rollins was one of those guys every mountain town has. Big shoulders, permanent flannel jacket, face like old leather. Ran excavation equipment most of his life, and spoke maybe 6 words an hour unless whiskey was involved. When I arrived at the gate around 8, Pete already had the bulldozer unloaded from the trailer, engine rumbling low in the cold morning air. A couple sheriff deputies sat parked nearby drinking gas station coffee. We'd notified the department beforehand because the last thing anybody wanted was Trevor calling in a fake emergency while we were working. And then there were the spectators. Word travels fast in small towns. By the time I got there, maybe 15 people had gathered along the roadside pretending they just happened to be nearby. Old ranchers leaning against trucks, a couple younger guys filming on phones. Even Doris Hensley from the diner sitting in a lawn chair like she brought tickets to a parade. Pete nodded toward the crowd. You're providing entertainment today. Apparently. Leonard pulled up a few minutes later carrying a folder thick with paperwork. He handed copies of the court order to both deputies, then handed one to me. Everything's documented, he said calmly. You're within your rights. I looked at the gate one last time. Honestly, it was impressive craftsmanship. Heavy steel, electronic system, reinforced hinges. Trevor probably spent 30 grand on the thing easy. Maybe more. Would have made a fine entrance somewhere else. Just not there. Pete climbed into the bulldozer cab, while diesel smoke drifted through the trees. The whole crowd got quiet in that strange way people do right before something irreversible happens. Then Trevor's SUV came flying down the road. Too late. He slammed to a stop sideways in the gravel, jumped out, and started yelling before the engine even died. What the hell do you think you're doing? Leonard stepped forward immediately. Mr. Caldwell, you were served 14 days ago. You can't destroy private property. I remember Trevor pointing at the gate like we were robbing Fort Knox, while two deputies stood 10 feet away, looking completely bored. That structure is illegally obstructing a lawful easement, Leonard replied. You were ordered to remove it. Trevor looked at me then, red-faced and furious. This is psychotic, Wade. And that right there, weirdly enough, was the moment I stopped disliking him and actually felt a little sorry for him. Because for the first time since he moved there, Trevor finally realized money wasn't going to save him. The mountain didn't care who he used to be in California. The judge didn't care how expensive his attorneys were. And that bulldozer definitely didn't care about his feelings. Pete leaned out the cab window. You want me to wait or work? I looked at Trevor. You had 2 weeks. Then Pete lowered the blade. Now, if you've never seen a bulldozer hit steel up close, let me tell you, there's nothing subtle about it. First came the scream of twisting metal, sharp enough to echo through the trees. Then one of the stone columns cracked straight down the middle like somebody fired a cannon through it. The crowd actually jumped backward. Trevor started shouting again, something about lawsuits and damages, but his voice got swallowed by the sound of 40,000 pounds of machinery turning his luxury gate into scrap metal. One camera sparked blue and died instantly. The keypad ripped clean off the column. Steel folded inward like a crushed soda can. 5 minutes. That's all it took. 5 months of arrogance. Gone in 5 minutes. Afterward, Pete pushed the debris aside while county workers marked the remaining concrete for removal later. I stood there watching the cleared roadway stretch up through the trees toward my property, open again for the first time in months, and I swear the whole valley felt lighter somehow. Trevor didn't say much after that. Oh, he threatened lawsuits for a while, claimed emotional distress, destruction of private property, harassment, all kinds of things. But Judge Bennett shut that down almost immediately. Not only did the court dismiss Trevor's claims, the judge ordered him to reimburse my legal fees and cover nearly $4,000 in road repairs caused by his construction crews. That part hurt him worse than the gate. See, men like Trevor can tolerate losing. What they can't tolerate is public humiliation. And in a small town like Alder Creek, everybody heard about it. The diner heard about it. The hardware store heard about it. Church parking lots heard about it. By winter, the Caldwells barely spoke to anybody anymore. Their giant, wilderness dream home sat up on the ridge glowing like a luxury resort while the rest of the valley quietly moved on without them. No invitations to cookouts. No neighborly favors during snowstorms. No extra hands when a tree blocked their driveway. People weren't cruel exactly. They just stopped pretending the Caldwells belonged there. About 2 years later, I saw a real estate sign go up near their driveway. Few months after that, they were gone. Last I heard, they moved to Colorado. Sometimes people ask if I regret any of it. Truthfully, I regret that it ever became necessary. I would have shared coffee with that man. I would have helped plow his driveway during winter, pulled his truck out of ditches, watched his place while they traveled. That's what neighbors out there do. But respect matters in places like that. You can't move into a community, decide the old rules don't apply anymore, then act shocked when people push back. And maybe Trevor still tells the story differently somewhere. Maybe he says the locals were hostile or stubborn or resistant to change. Maybe he genuinely believes he was the victim. But I still drive that same road every week. Still haul timber through those mountains. Still stop sometimes near the spot where that gate used to stand. Only now there's nothing there except open gravel and pine trees. Exactly how it should have stayed from the beginning. And honestly, I'm curious what you would have done in my position. Would you have accepted the keypad compromise just to keep the peace? Or would you have fought it all the way like I did? Let me know down in the comments, because around here, people still argue about whether that bulldozer was justice or revenge.